The morning sun cast a golden glow over Buckingham Palace as the household staff moved with practiced efficiency through the grand corridors. Today was no ordinary day in the British royal calendar. Trooping the color, the magnificent military spectacle celebrating the monarch's official birthday, would soon unfold with all its pageantry and tradition. In the heart of the palace, preparations had been underway since dawn. With every detail meticulously planned and executed, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood before the ornate mirror in her private dressing room, adjusting her elegant hat while her lady-in-waiting made final touches to her outfit. The soft morning light filtering through the tall windows highlighted her composed demeanor, though those who knew her well could detect the subtle signs of anticipation mixed with the gentle concern that came with managing 3 young children during such a public event. Down the corridor, the sound of excited chatter and occasional bursts of laughter echoed from the children's quarters. Prince George, now growing into his role as future heir with increasing awareness of royal protocol, was already dressed in his smart outfit, though his naturally tousled hair required several attempts to tame into respectability. Princess Charlotte, ever the perfectionist even at her young age, had insisted on choosing her own accessories, and was carefully arranging them with the seriousness of someone twice her age. But it was 5-year-old Prince Louis who commanded the most attention that morning. His infectious energy seemed to bounce off the walls as he darted between his nanny, his mother, and anyone else who happened to cross his path. The youngest of the Wales children had already developed quite a reputation for his spontaneous and delightfully unpredictable behavior at public events, much to the entertainment of the British public and the gentle exasperation of palace protocol officers. His nanny, Maria Teresa Turion Barallo, a graduate of the prestigious Norland College, watched him with the practiced eye of someone who had seen it all. She had dressed countless royal children for significant occasions, but Louis presented unique challenges. His curious nature and boundless enthusiasm meant that keeping him pristine and properly dressed required constant vigilance and considerable diplomatic skills. The palace corridors buzzed with activity as various members of the household prepared for the day ahead. Security personnel conducted their final sweeps. Communications teams tested their equipment, and transportation coordinators reviewed timing schedules with military precision. The Prince of Wales had already departed early for his ceremonial duties, leaving Catherine to orchestrate the complex logistics of getting 3 children ready for one of the most watched royal events of the year. As the family prepared to leave their private apartments, Louis discovered a window overlooking the palace courtyard, where military personnel were making their final preparations. His eyes widened with wonder as he watched the horse guards in their magnificent uniforms, their boots polished to mirror brightness, their movements crisp and purposeful. The sight of the horses particularly captivated him, their coats gleaming in the morning sun, their ceremonial tack jingling softly as they shifted in formation. Catherine joined her youngest son at the window, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder as she too observed the scene below. She had experienced many trooping the color ceremonies, first as a spectator, then as a royal girlfriend, and now as a senior working member of the royal family. Each perspective had brought its own unique blend of excitement and responsibility, but watching it through her children's eyes added an entirely new dimension to the ancient ceremony. The significance of the day was not lost on the young family. Trooping the color represented centuries of military tradition, a spectacular display of precision, loyalty, and national pride. For the children, however, it meant something both simpler and more complex: a chance to wave at thousands of people, to see magnificent horses in colorful uniforms, and to experience the peculiar mixture of duty and celebration that defined so much of their lives. Palace staff had learned to build extra time into the schedule when the children were involved. Louis, in particular, had a talent for discovering interesting details that others might overlook, whether it was an unusual button on a guardsman's uniform or an unexpected sound from the crowd. His genuine curiosity and unfiltered reactions had already provided several memorable moments at previous public appearances, earning him a special place in the hearts of royal watchers worldwide. As the departure time approached, the family gathered in one of the palace's formal reception rooms for a final briefing. Catherine reviewed the day's schedule with the children, using simple language to explain what would happen and when. George and Charlotte listened attentively, having experienced enough royal events to understand the importance of proper behavior, while Louis nodded seriously, though his attention occasionally wandered to the ornate ceiling decorations above them. The transportation convoy had already assembled in the palace courtyard, a carefully coordinated procession of vehicles that would carry the family through the streets of London to Horse Guards Parade. As they made their way toward the waiting cars, Louis pressed his face against various windows, trying to catch glimpses of the crowds already gathering along the route. His excitement was palpable, radiating through the group and bringing smiles to the faces of even the most protocol-conscious palace officials. There was something irresistibly charming about his unbridled enthusiasm, his genuine delight in experiences that adults might take for granted. As the family settled into their vehicle for the journey to Horse Guards Parade, Louis bounced slightly in his seat, his eyes bright with anticipation for whatever wonders the day might bring. The stage was set for another memorable royal appearance, with thousands of spectators lining the streets and millions more watching from around the world. None of them could have predicted exactly how this particular trooping the color would unfold, or how one small prince's natural exuberance would once again capture hearts and create moments of pure joy that would be remembered long after the last note of the national anthem had faded away. The royal convoy glided through the streets of central London as crowds of well-wishers lined the route, their faces bright with excitement and anticipation. Union Jack flags fluttered in the gentle breeze while smartphone cameras captured every moment of the procession. Inside the lead vehicle, Louis had positioned himself strategically by the window, his small hands pressed against the glass as he took in the spectacular sight of thousands of people gathered specifically to see his family. The journey from Buckingham Palace to Horse Guards Parade typically took only a few minutes by car, but today the route was extended to allow more people the opportunity to catch a glimpse of the royal family. Louis waved enthusiastically at every cluster of spectators they passed, his natural instinct to acknowledge the crowd's presence delighting onlookers who managed to capture his attention. His siblings, George and Charlotte, waved as well, though with the more measured gestures they had learned through experience and gentle guidance. Catherine observed her youngest child's animated responses with a mixture of maternal pride and watchful concern. Louis possessed an innate ability to connect with people, his genuine reactions creating moments of spontaneous joy that no amount of protocol training could manufacture. However, his unpredictability also meant that she needed to remain alert to guide him when necessary, helping him navigate the complex balance between natural expression and royal decorum. As their vehicle approached Horse Guards Parade, the magnificent Georgian buildings came into view, their honey-colored stone facades glowing in the morning sunlight. The vast parade ground was already filled with precisely arranged formations of guards in their iconic red tunics and towering bearskin hats. The sight was breathtaking in its scale and precision, a living tableau of military tradition that had been performed in essentially the same manner for generations. The sound of military bands tuning their instruments drifted through the air, creating an atmosphere of contained excitement. Hundreds of musicians from various regiments had gathered to provide the musical accompaniment for the ceremony, their instruments gleaming as brightly as their polished buttons. For Louis, who had always shown a keen interest in music and sounds, this was particularly fascinating. His head turned toward each new musical phrase, his expression focused as he tried to identify the different instruments. Security personnel had cordoned off specific areas for the royal family, with sightlines carefully calculated to provide the best views, while maintaining appropriate distances from the active participants in the ceremony. As the family's vehicle came to a stop, palace staff moved with practiced efficiency to ensure a smooth transition from car to viewing area. Catherine stepped out first, her elegant outfit perfectly coordinated for the formal occasion, followed by George and Charlotte, who had learned to pause briefly for photographers before continuing to their designated positions. Louis emerged last, his eyes immediately drawn upward to the flagpoles where enormous royal standards snapped crisply in the breeze. The scale of everything around him seemed to register on his face as wonder mixed with slight overwhelm. The parade ground stretched before them like a vast outdoor theater, filled with more people in uniform than he had ever seen in one place. The precision of their formations, the synchronized movements of hundreds of guardsmen, and the overall grandeur of the scene created a sensory experience unlike anything in his young life. A temporary platform had been constructed to provide the royal family with an elevated view of the proceedings. As they made their way toward their designated seats, Louis's attention was captured by the magnificent horses standing in formation nearby. These were not ordinary horses but specially trained cavalry mounts, their coats groomed to perfection, their ceremonial tack polished to a brilliant shine. Several of the horses seemed to sense his fascination, turning their heads slightly in his direction, which only increased his delight. The ceremony began with the traditional inspection of the troops by the monarch, who rode in full military dress uniform down the ranks of guardsmen. Louis watched with rapt attention as the sovereign acknowledged each regiment, the ancient ritual playing out with clockwork precision. The sound of hundreds of boots moving in perfect unison created a rhythmic backdrop that seemed to hypnotize him, his small body swaying slightly in time with the military cadence. As the formal inspection concluded, the massed bands began to play the first of many traditional military marches that would accompany the trooping ceremony. The music swelled across the parade ground, its martial rhythm stirring something deep and primal in all who heard it. Louis clapped his hands together in time with the music, his natural rhythm allowing him to match the beat with surprising accuracy for someone his age. Charlotte leaned over to whisper something in her younger brother's ear, pointing toward a particular group of musicians whose instruments caught the light in spectacular fashion. Her protective older sister instincts had kicked in as she noticed his growing excitement, and she seemed to be sharing some insider knowledge about what to expect next. George, meanwhile, maintained the serious demeanor that was becoming his trademark at public events, though careful observers could detect the slight smile that played at the corners of his mouth as he watched Louis's reactions, the crowd in the stands surrounding. The parade ground had grown steadily throughout the morning, with many spectators having arrived hours early to secure the best possible views. Their attention was divided between the magnificent military display unfolding before them and the charming family drama playing out in the royal viewing area. Binoculars and telephoto lenses focused regularly on Louis, whose animated responses were providing entertainment that rivaled the official ceremony. As the trooping portion of the ceremony reached its crescendo, with the regimental color being carried through the ranks in a display of military choreography that had been rehearsed countless times, Louis stood on his chair to get a better view. His action was both entirely natural for a curious 5-year-old and slightly outside the bounds of typical royal protocol, creating one of those delightful moments that would later be replayed countless times on social media. Catherine's gentle hand on his back provided both support and subtle guidance, allowing him to see while encouraging appropriate behavior. Her skill at managing such situations had been honed through numerous public appearances, and she had developed an almost intuitive sense of when to intervene and when to allow natural childish enthusiasm to shine through. The morning air carried the sound of military commands, musical flourishes, and the distant cheers of spectators who lined the surrounding streets. For Louis, every element of the scene contributed to a sensory symphony that held his complete attention, setting the stage for even more memorable moments as the ceremony continued to unfold around him. The ceremony continued to unfold with its centuries-old precision, each movement and musical phrase following tradition, established long before any of the current participants were born. Louis remained captivated by every detail, his attention darting between the colorful uniforms, the gleaming instruments, and the magnificent horses that stood with almost supernatural stillness despite the noise and activity surrounding them. His natural curiosity transformed each element of the formal proceedings into a source of wonder and discovery. As the massed bands moved into position for the next phase of the ceremony, Louis discovered that he could predict certain musical phrases that repeated throughout the performance. His small hands began to move in time with the conductor's baton, though he was too far away to actually see the musical direction. Instead, he seemed to sense the rhythm and flow of the music, responding to it with the unconscious grace that children often display when they encounter something that genuinely moves them. The precision drill movements of the guard regiments created geometric patterns across the parade ground that shifted and reformed. Like a living kaleidoscope, Louis leaned forward in his chair, trying to understand how hundreds of people could move together so perfectly, their timing synchronized to the split second. When one particularly complex formation began to take shape, he pointed excitedly and tugged on Charlotte's sleeve, wanting to share his amazement at the visual spectacle unfolding before them. Catherine noticed her son's growing animation and whispered something in his ear that made him nod seriously, before settling back into his chair with renewed focus. Her ability to provide gentle guidance without dampening his natural enthusiasm had become one of her most valuable skills as a royal parent. She understood that Louis's authentic reactions were part of what made these public appearances so special, but she also recognized the importance of helping him learn appropriate ways to express his excitement. The crowd in the surrounding stands had begun to focus as much attention on the royal viewing area as on the ceremony itself. Louis's expressions and gestures were being captured by countless cameras, his genuine delight providing a refreshing counterpoint to the formal nature of the military proceedings. Professional photographers, many of whom had covered royal events for decades, found themselves adjusting their lenses to capture his spontaneous moments, recognizing that these images would likely become some of the most memorable from the entire event. During a particularly stirring musical passage, Louis began to bounce slightly in his seat, his whole body responding to the rhythm of the military march. The sight of a small prince unconsciously dancing to music performed by some of Britain's finest military musicians created a moment of pure joy that seemed to transcend the formal boundaries of the occasion. Several of the guardsmen, despite their training to maintain absolute composure, allowed subtle smiles to cross their faces as they caught glimpses of his enthusiastic response. The ceremony's next phase involved a complex maneuver known as the troop, where the regimental color would be carried through the ranks of assembled guardsmen. This ancient ritual, dating back centuries, represented the practical origins of the ceremony when soldiers needed to see their regiment's flag to know where to rally during battle. For Louis, however, it was simply another fascinating display of coordinated movement and colorful pageantry. As the color party began their ceremonial march, Louis stood up again to get a better view, this time remembering to look back at his mother for permission before fully committing to the action. Catherine's approving nod allowed him to remain standing, and he watched with intense concentration as the ornate flag made its way through the perfectly aligned rows of guardsmen. The flag itself, heavy with history and adorned with battle honors from campaigns stretching back generations, seemed to carry additional significance that even a 5-year-old could sense. George and Charlotte had settled into the practiced calm that came with their increasing experience at such events, but they continued to steal glances at their younger brother, clearly entertained by his ongoing discoveries. Charlotte particularly seemed to take pleasure in Louis's reactions, occasionally pointing out details she thought he might find interesting, her protective older sister instincts creating touching moments of sibling connection amid the formal grandeur. The military bands shifted into a new formation for the next musical selection, their instruments catching the sunlight as they moved with the same precision that characterized every aspect of the ceremony. Louis watched the repositioning with fascination, trying to understand the logic behind the complex choreography that governed not just the movement of soldiers, but also the placement of musicians, horses, and equipment across the vast parade ground. A gentle breeze picked up, causing the numerous flags and standards around the parade ground to unfurl more dramatically. Louis's attention was immediately drawn to this new visual element, his eyes tracking the movement of fabric against the clear blue sky. The contrast between the structured precision of the human participants and the organic flow of wind-blown banners seemed to capture his imagination in a new way. The crowd's energy had been building steadily throughout the morning, their appreciation for both the ceremony and the charming royal family dynamics becoming increasingly evident. Scattered applause and murmurs of approval could be heard during quieter moments in the proceedings, creating an atmosphere that felt both formal and warmly human. Louis seemed to sense this positive energy from the spectators, occasionally turning to wave at nearby sections of the stands, his natural instinct to acknowledge friendly attention overriding any concerns about protocol. As the ceremony moved toward its climactic phases, anticipation began to build for the elements that traditionally generated the most excitement among spectators. The military participants, despite their professional composure, seemed to stand a little straighter, their movements carrying an extra measure of precision as they prepared for the moments that would test their training and coordination most severely. Louis's excitement was becoming increasingly evident, his small body practically vibrating with anticipation, even though he had no specific knowledge of what was coming next. Children often possess an intuitive ability to sense when something special is about to happen, and his behavior suggested that he had picked up on the subtle changes in atmosphere that preceded the ceremony's most spectacular moments. The positioning of aircraft, the final preparations of ground crews, and the coordination of timing between military units both on the ground and in the air were all proceeding according to plans that had been months in the making. Soon the skies above Horse Guards Parade would fill with the sights and sounds that would provide Louis with the most memorable moments of an already extraordinary day, creating images and reactions that would be treasured by royal watchers for years to come. The distant rumble of aircraft engines began as barely audible background noise, mixing with the sounds of military bands and crowd conversation. Most spectators were still focused on the ground-based ceremony, when Louis suddenly tilted his head upward, his sensitive young hearing detecting something that adults around him had not yet noticed. His expression shifted from general excitement to focused anticipation, as if some internal radar had picked up signals of approaching wonder. Catherine followed her son's gaze skyward, recognizing the telltale signs that the Royal Air Force flypast was beginning to take shape in the distance. This aerial display, featuring dozens of aircraft from various RAF squadrons, represented one of the most technically challenging and visually spectacular elements of the entire Trooping the Color ceremony. For Louis, who had always shown fascination with anything that moved through the sky, from birds to balloons to commercial aircraft, this would be the ultimate sensory experience. The first aircraft to appear were small dots against the blue sky, their formation so tight and precise that they seemed to move as a single entity. As they drew closer, the distinctive shapes of fighter jets became visible, their sleek profiles cutting through the air with effortless grace. Louis jumped up from his chair without thinking, his instinctive response to point and wave taking precedence over any consideration of royal protocol. The lead formation thundered overhead with a sound that seemed to vibrate through every person on the parade ground. The Typhoon fighters, painted in their distinctive gray livery, passed in perfect alignment, their jet engines creating a symphony of power that momentarily drowned out every other sound. Louis's eyes tracked their movement across the sky, his small arm extended in an enthusiastic wave that seemed to encompass not just the aircraft but the entire, magnificent spectacle unfolding above them. Following closely behind the fighters came the larger transport aircraft, their more stately progress allowing spectators to appreciate their impressive size and capability. Louis's waving became even more animated as each new formation appeared, his excitement building with every aircraft that passed overhead. His movements were completely uninhibited, the pure joy of a child witnessing something extraordinary, overriding any learned behavior about appropriate public conduct. The historic aircraft formation drew gasps of appreciation from the crowd as vintage fighters and bombers from previous eras made their appearance. These meticulously maintained warbirds, some dating back to World War II, represented living history flying through the sky above the ceremony. For Louis, however, they were simply more fascinating flying machines to wave at, each one deserving of his enthusiastic acknowledgement and approval. Catherine watched her son's reactions with a mixture of delight and gentle concern, ready to provide guidance if needed, but recognizing that his authentic response was creating exactly the kind of magical moment that made these public appearances so special. His uninhibited waving and pointing seemed to capture the essence of childhood wonder in a way that no amount of coaching could replicate. The crowd in the stands had begun to mirror Louis's enthusiasm, many standing and pointing as each new formation passed overhead. His infectious excitement seemed to spread through the assembled spectators, creating a sense of shared wonder that transcended the formal nature of the occasion. Professional photographers were working frantically to capture both the aircraft and the young prince's reactions, recognizing that they were witnessing something genuinely special. A formation of Royal Navy helicopters approached from a different direction, their distinctive rotors creating a different type of aerial music as they maintained precise formation despite the challenges of helicopter flight. Louis's attention swiveled to track this new development, his waving becoming even more vigorous as he tried to acknowledge multiple aircraft simultaneously. The sight of a small royal prince enthusiastically greeting military helicopters created an image that perfectly encapsulated the intersection of tradition, service, and family that defined the modern monarchy. The red arrows, The RAF's world-famous aerobatic display team had been saved for the finale of the flypast. As their distinctive Red Hawks approached in their trademark diamond formation, trailing streams of red, white, and blue smoke, the crowd's excitement reached its peak. Louis seemed to sense that something even more special was happening, his entire body language shifting to one of intense anticipation and delight. The precision of the Red Arrow's formation flying was breathtaking to behold, their aircraft maintaining distances measured in feet while traveling at hundreds of miles per hour. For Louis, the addition of colored smoke trails transformed the sky into a living canvas of patriotic artistry. His waving reached a crescendo of enthusiasm as the formation passed directly overhead, the smoke trails creating dramatic streaks against the blue sky that would linger long after the aircraft had disappeared. George and Charlotte had also stood to watch the flypast, but their responses remained more measured and controlled, their increasing awareness of royal protocol tempering their natural excitement. However, both siblings clearly took pleasure in Louis's uninhibited reactions, occasionally exchanging glances and smiles as their youngest brother continued his enthusiastic aerial greeting campaign. The final elements of the flypast included larger military transport aircraft and tankers, their impressive size and stately progress providing a fitting conclusion to the aerial display. Louis maintained his energetic waving throughout, seeming to understand instinctively that each aircraft and every person aboard deserved acknowledgement and appreciation for their participation in this magnificent spectacle. The last aircraft disappeared into the distance, their engine noise gradually fading to be replaced by the returning sounds of military bands and crowd conversation. Louis remained standing and scanning the sky, apparently hoping for more aircraft to appear. His disappointment at the conclusion of the flypast was evident, though he continued to point occasionally at contrails or distant commercial aircraft that had nothing to do with the ceremony. The impact of Louis's enthusiastic response to the flypast was immediately apparent in the crowd's reaction. Spontaneous applause broke out, not just for the magnificent aerial display, but clearly also an appreciation of the young prince's infectious excitement. His genuine, unscripted reactions had transformed what might have been simply an impressive military demonstration into a moment of pure joy that would be remembered and shared for years to come. Catherine gently encouraged Louis to return to his seat as the ground-based ceremony prepared to resume, but his eyes remained fixed on the sky, clearly hoping for the return of his newfound aerial friends. The combination of military precision, technological marvel, and childhood wonder had created a perfect storm of memorable moments that captured the very best of both royal tradition and human spontaneity. The immediate aftermath of the flypast revealed the true extent of Louis's impact on the assembled crowd. Throughout the stands surrounding Horse Guard's parade, spectators were turning to each other with broad smiles, sharing comments about the young prince's enthusiastic response to the aircraft display. His uninhibited waving and pointing had clearly resonated with people of all ages, creating a shared moment of joy that transcended the formal boundaries typically associated with royal ceremonies. Professional photographers and camera operators, many of whom had covered countless royal events throughout their careers, recognized immediately that they had captured something extraordinary. The images of Louis waving energetically at the passing aircraft, his face bright with wonder and excitement, represented the kind of authentic moment that no amount of planning or staging could produce. These spontaneous reactions created the human interest stories that would dominate coverage of the event for days to come. Social media platforms began lighting up with posts and comments about Louis's behavior within minutes of the flypast's conclusion. Spectators who had managed to capture video footage on their phones were already uploading clips that showed the young prince's animated responses from various angles. The hashtags related to his appearance began trending almost immediately, with users sharing their delight at his genuine enthusiasm and natural charm. Television commentators, who had been providing steady narration of the military ceremony, found themselves switching focus to discuss the royal family dynamics playing out in full view of millions of viewers worldwide. Veteran royal correspondents, accustomed to analyzing every gesture and expression for deeper meaning, seemed genuinely charmed by Louis's straightforward display of childhood excitement. His reactions required no interpretation or analysis. They were simply pure, joyful responses to an extraordinary experience. The international media contingent covering the event represented news organizations from dozens of countries, each seeking their own angle on the traditional British ceremony. However, Lewis's enthusiastic aircraft waving provided a universal story that transcended cultural and national boundaries. The image of a small child delighting in military aircraft spoke to fundamental human experiences of wonder and excitement that resonated across different societies and backgrounds. Back in the royal viewing area, Catherine continued to manage the delicate balance between allowing Louis's natural responses while providing gentle guidance when necessary. Her skill at handling such situations had been honed through numerous public appearances, and she understood that her son's authentic reactions were creating positive publicity for the royal family that no public relations campaign could manufacture. The key was supporting his enthusiasm while ensuring it remained within appropriate bounds. Palace communications staff, monitoring media coverage from their temporary command center, watched with satisfaction as positive stories about Louis began to proliferate across traditional and social media platforms. His behavior was being universally described in affectionate terms, with commentators praising his natural charm and genuine excitement. For an institution that faced ongoing challenges in maintaining public relevance and support, these moments of authentic human connection were invaluable. The crowd's ongoing reaction to Louis extended beyond the immediate aftermath of the flypast. Throughout the remainder of the ceremony, spectators could be seen glancing regularly toward the royal viewing area, hoping to catch additional glimpses of his responses to various elements of the proceedings. His presence had transformed the event from a formal, military display into a more personal and relatable experience that connected with people's own memories of childhood. Foreign dignitaries and official guests attending the ceremony found themselves drawn into conversations about the charming young prince and his enthusiastic responses. These informal discussions, taking place in multiple languages around the viewing areas, demonstrated how Louis's natural behavior had created diplomatic soft power that extended far beyond traditional royal protocol. His authentic reactions had given international visitors a glimpse of the human side of the British royal family that formal ceremonies rarely revealed. The technical crew, responsible for live television coverage, faced the challenge of balancing their planned shots of military precision with the obvious viewer interest in Louis's ongoing reactions. Experienced directors made real-time decisions to include more coverage of the royal family dynamics, recognizing that the authentic family moments were proving as compelling as the formal ceremony itself. Camera operators adjusted their positions to capture both the official proceedings and the charming side story unfolding in the royal viewing area. Royal protection officers, trained to remain vigilant for security threats while maintaining low profiles, found themselves suppressing smiles as they observed Louis's continued enthusiasm for various aspects of the ceremony. Their professional composure was being tested by the infectious nature of his excitement. Though their training ensured they remained focused on their primary responsibilities, while appreciating the positive atmosphere his presence was creating. The ceremony's official participants, from the guardsmen maintaining perfect formation to the military band members concentrating on their complex musical arrangements, were also aware of the young prince's enthusiastic presence. While their training prevented them from breaking character or losing focus, many later admitted that his genuine reactions had added an extra dimension of meaning to their performance of duties they had rehearsed countless times. Members of the extended royal family, watching from their designated viewing areas, exchanged knowing glances and subtle smiles as Louis's enthusiasm continued throughout the ceremony. Many had their own experiences of managing young children during public events, and they recognized both the challenges and the rewards that came with including authentic family dynamics in formal royal occasions. The ripple effects of Louis's enthusiastic aircraft waving extended beyond the immediate event as news organizations began preparing their coverage for evening broadcasts and next-day publications. Editorial meetings in newsrooms across London and beyond were already discussing how to feature his charming behavior in their reports, recognizing that these human interest elements often generated more public engagement than detailed analysis of military traditions or royal protocol. Public opinion polling, conducted in the days following major royal events, consistently showed that authentic moments like Louis's enthusiastic waving generated significant positive sentiment toward the royal family. His natural behavior reminded people that beneath the formal titles and ceremonial roles were real people experiencing genuine emotions and reactions, creating connections that strengthened public support for the institution he would someday help to represent. The lasting impact of his enthusiastic response to the flypast was already becoming apparent as the ceremony continued, with his infectious excitement having transformed a formal military display into a celebration of wonder, tradition, and the timeless appeal of childhood joy expressed without reservation or self-consciousness. As the final notes of the national anthem echoed across Horse Guards Parade, and the formal ceremony drew to its traditional close, the true measure of Louis's impact began to reveal itself in ways both immediate and far-reaching. The crowd's sustained applause seemed to carry an extra warmth, acknowledging not just the magnificent military display they had witnessed, but also the charming family drama that had unfolded alongside the official proceedings. The journey back to Buckingham Palace provided an opportunity for the family to decompress from the intense public scrutiny of the ceremony. Louis, still buzzing with excitement from his aircraft encounters, continued to scan the sky through the car windows, occasionally pointing at distant contrails or commercial aircraft that bore no resemblance to the military formations he had waved at so enthusiastically. His siblings listened patiently as he recounted his favorite moments from the flypast, his animated descriptions revealing just how deeply the experience had affected him. Catherine used the private moments during their return journey to gently discuss the day's events with all three children, helping them process the experience while reinforcing lessons about public behavior and royal responsibilities. However, her approach with Louis focused more on channeling his natural enthusiasm rather than dampening it, recognizing that his authentic reactions had created some of the most positive royal coverage in recent memory. Back at Buckingham Palace, the traditional balcony appearance awaited, providing one final opportunity for the public to see the royal family and for Louis to potentially create additional memorable moments. Palace staff had learned to build flexibility into their schedules when Louis was involved, understanding that his unpredictable nature could either create wonderful photo opportunities or require quick thinking to manage unexpected situations. The crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace had swelled throughout the morning, with many people arriving specifically hoping to catch glimpses of the young prince, whose trooping the color antics had already begun spreading across social media platforms. The anticipation was palpable as thousands of spectators pressed against the barriers, their phones and cameras ready to capture whatever moments the balcony appearance might provide. As the family emerged onto the famous balcony, Louis's eyes immediately went skyward, clearly hoping for a repeat performance of the morning's aerial spectacle. His disappointed expression when no aircraft immediately appeared drew chuckles from the crowd below, many of whom had seen footage of his enthusiastic waving during the ceremony. His continued skywatching throughout the balcony appearance suggested that the flypast had left a lasting impression that would influence his expectations of all future royal events. The traditional second flypast, featuring a smaller formation of aircraft, finally materialized to Louis's obvious delight. His renewed waving was if anything more enthusiastic than his morning performance, as if he had been storing up energy specifically for this moment. The combination of his morning aircraft greeting and this balcony encore created a complete narrative arc that perfectly captured the intersection of childhood wonder and royal tradition. News organizations worldwide led their coverage of trooping, the color with images and footage of Louis's enthusiastic responses. The universal appeal of his genuine excitement transcended cultural and political boundaries, providing news editors with feel-good stories that contrasted sharply with more serious international developments. His behavior became a trending topic across multiple continents, demonstrating the global reach and impact of authentic royal moments. In the days following the ceremony, compilation videos of Louis's aircraft waving began accumulating millions of views across various social media platforms. International news organizations created features exploring the psychology of childhood wonder and the appeal of authentic moments in an increasingly manufactured media landscape. His spontaneous reaction sparked discussions about the role of genuine emotion in public life and the refreshing contrast his behavior provided to typical political and ceremonial performances. The Royal Air Force personnel who had participated in the flypast learned of Lewis's enthusiastic reception through their own social media feeds and news coverage. Many expressed delight that their professional precision and skill had generated such obvious joy in a young spectator, creating a sense of connection between military service members and the royal family they serve. Several RAF units began incorporating references to Louis's enthusiastic waving into their social media content, recognizing the positive publicity his reactions had generated for military aviation. Educational institutions and child development experts used Louis's behavior as an example of natural learning and authentic response to extraordinary experiences. His ability to maintain wonder and excitement despite growing up, surrounded by formal ceremonies and public attention, sparked discussions about preserving childhood innocence while preparing young people for public responsibilities. The economic impact of positive royal coverage, including the tourism and merchandise sales generated by appealing royal moments, was not lost on government officials and business leaders. Lewis's charming behavior contributed to the broader soft power projection that royal events provided for British interests worldwide, demonstrating how authentic family moments could advance national objectives more effectively than formal diplomatic initiatives. Palace officials began incorporating lessons learned from Lewis's successful public appearances into their planning for future events. His natural responses had proven more valuable than carefully choreographed moments, suggesting that allowing authentic childhood behavior within appropriate boundaries could enhance rather than undermine royal ceremonial occasions. The long-term impact of Louis's enthusiastic aircraft waving extended beyond immediate media coverage to influence public perceptions of the royal family's relevance and relatability. His behavior reminded observers that the institution included real children experiencing genuine emotions, creating emotional connections that strengthened public support for the monarchy across generational and demographic boundaries. As night fell over London and the excitement of trooping, the color began to fade into memory. The images and videos of Lewis's enthusiastic waving continued circulating around the world. His spontaneous celebration of military aviation had created a moment of pure joy that transcended the formal boundaries of royal protocol, reminding millions of people of the simple pleasure that comes from witnessing something extraordinary and responding with unbridled enthusiasm. The lasting legacy of his aircraft waving would be measured not just in social media engagement or positive press coverage, but in the way his authentic reactions had demonstrated that wonder, excitement, and genuine human emotion could enhance rather than diminish the dignity and appeal of ancient ceremonial traditions. In an age of increasing skepticism toward institutions and formal ceremonies, Lewis's enthusiastic response provided a powerful reminder of the magic that could still be found in shared experiences of national celebration and military pride.